you can't just keep putting 10 out of 10s out there. You got to allow room for people to develop and grow. And we have youth on our Sundays because they're just playing A2 or singing a background vocal behind, but they're getting that experience. They're coming along and they're being trained for the next generation.
Hey, welcome into this episode of the Worship Band Builder Podcast, where we're working with you to lay the foundation for skillful worship. This is a new season where I'm talking to interesting people, and this is part 2 of our guest, Shawn Starbuck. Now, I gave him a big introduction in the first episode, but I'll give a little overview here. If you missed that first episode, it's about his life and his struggles getting to where he is today. And this episode is going to be about his ministry, more about the nuts and bolts of doing ministry in a mid-sized church and building up teams around him and being a worship leader. But Shawn is a CCM artist, a vocalist, a songwriter, a worship leader, and an ordained pastor. He's got a full-length album out called Not Ashamed. You can find it on streaming platforms. He co-wrote the Billboard charting Christmas single, You Are the Reason, in 2010. And he's currently the worship director at Christian Life Church in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. His website is ShawnStarbuck.com. You can find those links in the description. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and we're going to get right into this episode, right into the details about how, hopefully in this episode, you'll be able to hear some tips on how to become a successful, sustaining, a long-term worship ministry. Shawn's been there quite a while, and he's got some great tips. Let's get into it. You're at Christian Life Church in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. That's how we met.
Yep.
Funny enough, I was tuning your piano.
Yep.
And
thank you very much.
Chatting around like that. Let's dive into that a little bit, into how your team's there. Overall, right now, how many people are in your worship team, and your band, your singers, your tech, your support? What do you?
We've got a great team. It's anywhere from 35, 40 people, something like that.
I wanted to ask that because of context. Not that it matters if you have 3 people or 50 people or 100 people, but there's context to it. You have 40 volunteers, 30 to 40 volunteers, and that takes quite a bit of effort to make happen. Right? It takes effort to ramp that up.
Absolutely.
So when you think about it, why are the people drawn to your worship ministry right now? And talk about the good and the bad reasons. Why people would be drawn in, and how do you lead people who are at different levels musically and spiritually in that team?
That's a loaded question.
I know, I loaded that one up, man.
I got 1,000 thoughts on that one, man. I think people are attracted to good things. You know, people are attracted to what is good and what is pleasant. So, our worship ministry is good. I mean, we have good musicians. We have people who are really engaging with the Lord, and we just put in a new sound system. Things for our level are at a good, attractive level. Like a couple of years ago, we did a new stage, and I remember learning from the guys at Elevation is that the more better you do things, the more you will attract people to what you're trying to achieve. And so I knew that, and I was good for that. The other counterbalance on that side is making sure people are not just attracted to the illusion of what's taking place, but the real core motive of really trying to usher people into worship. Thankfully, I haven't really encountered that very much. Our team is really great, and the reason why it's really great is because I have, over the years, really put a strong importance on friendship. Like, one of my core values on our team is friendship. Everybody needs to be friend. I had an experience a long time ago where I was on team at a mega church, and I was on this stage and nobody would talk to me. Nobody would acknowledge me. There was jealousy. There was, I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel like I was part of the team, and that just stuck a hole in my heart for forever. To make sure that the people that are on stage with one another need to like one another, not just when they're scheduled, but do they miss one another? Are they hanging out together? Are they in each other's lives? So this is more of that pastoral side. So being a part of the teams that I've been a part of you're more than just a worship team. You're a worship family, and you belong. And if somebody's sick or someone's in the hospital, you're not there by yourself. You're there with the whole family. But I think that what attracts them is that, one, there's an excellence, that what you do is not just thrown together. It's not trying to figure things out. It's planned. We actually, several years ago, I went to a model of where we plan a month ahead. Like our songs for next month are already planned. Our teams are practicing them. People show up prepared. That's not the time we practice. That's the time where we just kind of put everything together. I kind of like label our flow, if you will, like you practice at home. That's your own responsibility. We rehearse together as a team, and then right before service, we refresh. It's a refresh. It's not a time to practice, rehearse, or work things out. That's just the refresh, and kind of give that that time just to build more confidence. And we're not working out any kinks at that time. It's more of just let's just remember what we've already decided we were going to do. Within the context of that too, you also have to, our church is a spirit-filled church, so we also believe that we leave room for God to move. And so we have an MD, a musical director on a mic, that's controlling tracks and calling out transitions in some areas that might be difficult in the song, different chord progressions or things like that. And sometimes our worship leaders will just want to go a different direction. And so there is a little bit of what we call a structure that supports spontaneity in our church. And so I think one of the things about our church that people always comment is that we like how worship is more of an experience. It's more of a journey than it is just singing a sing-along, and I believe that so much that we need to prepare, get everything, get plan A together, but also be ready for plan B kind of thing.
Yeah. And I know this because we talked, you're on Loop community mostly.
Yep.
And so you're able to create this whole thing. We're doing that course and
nice.
talking through with Michael about the course. That's what a lot of people think. Oh, if we use tracks, then we're going to be stuck with this
not at
rigid
all.
thing. But what you just explained is totally free flowing, but you're still using tracks.
And, I use this analogy too. I'll throw it out there, but I'm actually working on a book called River Guide, and it's about leading worship like a river guide would lead his team on a raft down a river. And as you're on that river, you got to think about, it's not about you, it's about the people on the boat with you. So how are you going to lead your team? They're the ones doing the work. Your congregation, they're in the boat. Like, how are you going to lead them through some of these rapids and some of these terrifying things that they may go into? And if you think about it, like getting on a boat with a whole bunch of white water rafting is in a sense like you asking them to, hey, be vulnerable in front of 100, 200, 300,000 people and show them your emotions. Like, oh my gosh, that's frightening. That's terrifying. I don't want to do that. Well, if we can guide them through that process, it's like, let's take this rapid, let's communicate through it and all that kind of stuff. And so we try to think about that. And those river guides, if you look into what they do, is they don't just jump on the river and let's see what happens. They know when the river turns. They know, okay, yesterday the river was at this level, today it's at this level, so we maybe need to make a tighter turn around this corner, or let's go wide around this turn so we don't hit that rock. So it's a worship leaders' responsibility, if you will, is to make sure you communicate with your team and through some of those rapid moments and making sure they're going to get through safe. I remember showing a friend of mine this when it was very early in my thoughts of two pictures. One was a group of people going down a rapid, completely terrified, almost tears in their face, and they're not even in control of the boat at all. Their oars are not doing anything, and they are frightened. And then a second picture of people who were doing it right, and they were smiling, and they were enjoying it, and they were going through it. And so we need to help our team be more like that second. And then the way you do that is through confidence. If your team is not confident of where you're going and how you're going to go into something, then they're going to be terrified. They're not going to be on, in alignment with you. They're going to question you. They're not going to have as much trust. But if you can say, I know where we're going. I know what we're doing. I know how we're going to do it. let's do this, let's talk through this, and then you can get through that. It puts a lot of more smiles on their faces, and then our congregation sees our team. We just had a worship night Wednesday night, and my gosh, we were having more fun than I think anybody was on stage. I'm running around talking, like just playing with the drummer and the bass, and we're all laughing, we're all smiling, and we're like, wow, this is so good. We were all in tune with one another, and we were enjoying that experience together. But if we don't know what's going on, we're going to be iPads right there. I'm like looking at every chord, every note. I'm like, what am I supposed to do next? I don't know what the heck I'm supposed to do. But if I already know what I'm supposed to do, that just takes that off the table, and we can enjoy one another and enjoy God's presence and see what He's doing in the room. So much more fun, I think.
Yeah, I mean, what you're explaining takes time.
Yeah.
And that confidence that you're saying, I mean, I think it comes from, where do you think it comes from? I mean, I think it comes from the leader.
Sure.
I mean,
Sure.
like you're saying, like the river guide, if you're out there like with 3 paddles flying everywhere and not know what you're doing, then everybody on, I can imagine when I was a younger musician, you know, every musician's going to have insecurity. Yes. They're going to have things they're trying to do that they're maybe not as good, or I got a guitar solo coming up, I got to hit those notes.
Yeah.
They're all in their head, you know. So as a leader, what you're explaining is really cool to see. You've got to that level where you've got a team that's you can have fun with, because a lot of time leading worship is, even if I'm a very confident leader, if I can't get my team with me, then I'm still feeling like, okay, is the drummer going to hit that note or that change? Is the bass player going to be, you know, are they going to forget their capos? You know, as a leader, I'm usually thinking all those things.
Yes.
And so I think, it takes time. Do you remember from when you took this church 7 years ago? How long did it take you to get where you one day you woke up and was like, okay, I'm feeling pretty confident with this group? How long did that take?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, my pastor was very brilliant in not throwing me in. Like, one of the best things that ever happened to me was he already knew my history at Mosaic and radio and all that kind of stuff. And he was like, I don't want people to know you for what you do, but for who you are. And so, ironically, my wife and I, she was actually on the worship team before I was. When I joined our worship team, she was up there singing. I was playing pads in the back in the dark. And I just had a love for what was happening in this house. Like, I really believed, and I still believe, that this is God's light to the city through this local house. That the friendships, people were at our house. We were worshiping God at our house before that ever happened on the stage. People were coming over. I remember my birthday, people from that team that we didn't even know each other yet, and we were having dinner and celebrating. And so from a very beginning, it was always the best that I possibly could, rooted in friendship and knowing one another.
Yeah, it sounds different than some of my experiences where, you know, you take a job and then they're like, all right, you're the guy. The next week you start and you got all these awkward band and all the transition and all the hurt people that are coming along with the last guy just left. I mean, you're
I don't have any experience with that. I'm thankful that I don't, but
that can happen, and it happens kind of quick. And it also happens, you're not expecting it, because, you know, you're in the interview process. Everything's great. You know, we got this great church, we got all these people. Then the first week you get there, you realize, oh, you mean the last worship leader quit unexpectedly, and he was having fights with these people. And then, you know, you get into this is a normal scenario. You're very blessed that you were integrated into a healthy.
If I was in that situation, I would probably take the team roller skating before I would have a practice. That's just my philosophy.
Yeah.
I don't want to be on stage with people who don't feel safe with me, or I don't feel safe with them. That's so important. Like, I think about what Jesus said. It's like, how can you worship me and still have something that's going on with the relationship? Leave your gift at the altar and go make things right with that person. If we really want to, and I'm talking about connecting with God at a spiritual level where his glory will fall, like where his presence will fall, but we still have all of these weird kinks going on that we haven't dealt with yet. But just imagine if all of that's out of the way. We are loving one. When you read Acts and you see chapter 2, you see that they had signs and wonders and miracles, and God was doing extraordinary things, and the number was being added to every day. Like, why was that? It was because they knew one another. They prayed together. They broke bread together. They like actually lived in community. And so why would we expect our community groups or our biblical groups to go through that and not our own worship team? Like our worship team is a group. It is a part of the church that has like-mindedness. Their connection is music, but they're just people, just like every other group people. So we need to be in relationship with one another.
I will say that it is super easy to feel alone.
Yeah.
I was on a big stage before I came here. It was huge. Yeah. And it was so big that you could put in your in-ears, walk out on stage, play your set, take them out, go home, and never even talk to anybody.
Yeah.
And you could, and I worked kind of hard to kind of get friendships, and I did have some friendships, but it was such a large program that it was like you really could show up, put your in-ears in. Yeah. I mean, you're so far away from any other band member, where other churches I've come from, they're just small little churches like your friends, and the church I'm at now is probably, it's about half the size of your church. So it's like we're all like buddies and friends.
Yeah.
And so it's different. Mega church is so much different.
It is.
I think, I guess my main point here is it's easy to feel alone. It doesn't matter. And I've been on the front of the mic as the worship leader. I've also been, in the back of the stage just playing the guitar part.
Yeah.
And every dynamic is different, and every band member. And I think it's very easy as a worship leader. It's more eye-opening now to see how lonely a musician can be, or how disconnected they can be because nobody talked to them, or nobody texted them or cared about them or whatever. And it can happen. I mean, it seems like you've experienced a little bit of that. I've definitely experienced it. The worship leader, once you're the worship leader, you're not really lonely too much because everybody knows you and everybody wants your time, and you feel like a little bit more popular. I know it's weird to say, but that's just, you're kind of in the in crowd. But if you're just playing guitar every month, maybe you're not as in, or maybe nobody ever talks to you.
Yeah.
And any time in my ministry where I've really felt like we've really had that synergy, it's been like I've been best friends with the 4 or 5 or 6, the main people. I've been pretty involved in their life.
Yeah.
Sometimes too much, like we're just together too much, you know what I mean?
Nice.
It's like, give me a break, y'all. We need to get out of my house.
Yeah. Right.
But let's see, how do you recruit, and how are you actively recruiting and building how do you build these strong, lasting relationships? It's not easy, but I mean, it sounds like you're succeeding. What are you doing that's intentional? Yeah.
The intentionality, I think, is the onboarding process. I think, ironically, I can't think of ever having to recruit. God just kind of sends people that people are interested. So I also have a philosophy. It's probably not popular. I don't like the word audition. I use the word evaluation. So by the time somebody is actually at an evaluation, there's already enough, like either through word of mouth or personal connection. Like I kind of know this person where they're at already. So the evaluation is like, okay, who are you? What do you want to do? Where do you want to be? And me as the worship pastor, how can I help you get there? And so our kind of evaluation, people, first of all, have to be part of the church. They can't just show up and just be involved. They need to be involved just like I was. I'm so grateful for that. Like, you're not called to this ministry, you're called to this house, this group of people. That's the first thing people need to really decide. Are you part of this church? And then I'm talking about the local church context. And then once they're there, then I get to know them. That's more of the pastoral. And again, I'm more of pastoral level. I have an assistant, and she's more of the clerical administrative stuff. But I'll meet with them. We'll get to know each other and share the philosophy of who we are, what we're trying to do. And then I invite people to come and hang out at our practice. Our practices are like technically very short, but time-wise very long. So what I mean by that, people come early and they hang out. While people are getting set up, there's conversations happening. People are showing, hey, I got this new pedal. What do you think of this? Things like that. Afterwards, it's like nobody's going home. Everybody's just sitting at the stage talking about what their kids did. So it's a very you create the culture that you want. And I think I did that early on many years ago of like establishing that if you're a part of this team, you need to open up your life to one another and be known by each other. I'll get videos, texts, people that have had vacations, I'll get videos of that, or people who are trying out new gear. What do you think of this? You have to just keep this open communication going on. You know?
So clarify for me, if I'm, let's say I'm going to your church 2-3 months, and I'm a musician, you know, that's my thing, and I'm just looking up there. Yeah. Where's the road for me? Do I have to come up to you and say, hey, or is there? I'm fishing for any recruiting. Is there a thing in the bulletin that says there's nothing? So they would have to go. Yeah, they'd have to kind of wiggle their way into friendships and say, "Oh, I also play guitar. You should ask Shawn if."
Our church does have a membership class, so if you do want, that's kind of like if there is a recruiting, that's where it would be. Where they take like a gift test or say, where do you want to be involved? And someone would say, I want to be involved in worship. They would send it to me, and then I would then follow up.
Okay, that's slightly recruiting. Yeah, I mean, that's a very soft recruiting.
Well, I learned this. This is for me. This is not for everybody, but a long time ago, I don't like recruiting because then I get sent people that I have to disappoint. So I would rather kind of like word of mouth. And there's enough people in my church that I'm like, hey, is there anybody in the congregation that we don't know about that maybe we should pursue? And you know, I talked about the worship pastor that was really a strong mentor to me, and he was always recruiting. And I think if we could have that mentality that I'm not recruiting to my team, I'm recruiting to the church. So after church and before service, I'm in the congregation shaking hands, meeting people. If there's someone I don't know, I'm saying, what are you interested in? So regardless if it's worship ministry or kids ministry or hosting, whatever it is, you can, if your team or if your church has hey, we're going to just naturally, not necessarily recruit, but point people to where they can get involved, then
you are kind of actively recruiting in your mind. Then. You are. I mean, I call it ask because I was a tech director at our church for a year or two, and I just would ask everybody. They come to we were kind of like, we need people. Mm-hmm. So every time, oh, hey, how you doing? I'm new. What do you do? Yeah. Well, exactly. I used to run sound. Okay. And I'd be like getting their phone number right there. Like that's how I'm recruiting. It's not, it's an active kind of antenna, like who's going to be the next person. Yeah. And I think that's, if you're in a smaller church and you're struggling, then maybe you're going in front of the stage and going, hey, we need musicians or whatever. If you're in a medium level church, you're kind of being zoned in on who's your next person. Sure. So that leads me to this. How are you building future leaders? I know your team is sort of, you're shifting your role a little bit and you're building leaders, but how do you build the leaders for your team, and how do you balance your role as a leader with other leadership on your team? And that's I find that's tricky to be like, you know, you are the worship pastor and you're like the head worship. Yeah, I think I hold that spiritual accountability for our team, but I share it with the team. So like, again, like this year, our big focus for Emily and I've talked about, my assistant and the directors. It's like, let's give everything away. Everything belongs to the team, whatever, in some way. Somebody has to own something. And that's not necessarily like a dictator ownership, but a steward ownership. Like God calls us to stewards. So whatever's, hey, and I believe in section leaders, like, hey man, maybe there's somebody over the bass, a drummer. Like I have sections where people can kind of just connect at an even deeper level. Like maybe you're on the worship team, but maybe a drummer is not necessarily in with a singer. They don't really share as much in common, but the drummers can all hang out and go to the drum store and hit on drums and say, man, that sounds good. Or this, man, why did they make that one? But just kind of building connection and stuff like that. So how do you it sounds like a very organic approach. How do you find when you get this drummer? I mean, is it like you're the drum leader? I mean, at our church, we sort of have a drum leader, but they just kind of rise into leadership. Everybody can just know, like, maybe it's just because he's the best drummer and everybody's like, yeah, he knows everything about drums. He's the leader. You could go that way, the way that then ego and that's what I'm saying. How do you kind of like, do you have a master plan? It's not a master plan, but it's more of a facilitator role. Yeah.
And it's communicated like, hey, this person is not better or worse or anything, but this is just somebody who has leadership qualities that will help this be better. Like, so I wouldn't think if anybody was going to do a section leader kind of model, like to not look for the best instrumentalist or vocalist, because they can be used to equip, but I would look for those leadership administrative qualities. So I'm an Enneagram 7, so I know that my bad part of who I am is I'm not a very good administrator. I can think of things, I can encourage people, I can get things set up, but the follow through is when you need to realize who on the team is actually going to actually plan hangouts, who's going to plan like a coffee get together, who actually is going to make sure that we actually show up at the drum shop, or who's going to plan that hockey, game that we're all going to go to. It's not going to be me. I'm going to throw it out there. I'm going to say, let's do this. And then like 12 weeks go by and it never happens.
So is this section model that you have, is it specific? Do you say, all right, Charlie, you're going to take on this role as the drum section leader, and then it's announced like Charlie's our drum section leader? Do you have?
It's different seasons
kind of like that?
Require different. So like, yeah, there have been times where they had drums and bass individually, but at times it makes more sense. Okay, drums and bass is really the rhythm. They are the one holding down the pocket. It's better for them to connect as bass and drums. And then other times it's like, okay, well, there's bass is part of guitar, so let's put bass guitars with electric guitars and acoustic guitars because they're all guitars. So I've tried different things, and I think trying to cross-pollinate as much as possible has been like the better approach versus singling, because then you start to create even cliques within the group, So trying to keep it together, it's a little bit of a dance, if you will. You got to kind of monitor it. You can't just be like, here's the formula. You can start with it, but you need to evaluate for your season, for your team, of how you're going to. But yes, you do have to clarify who that person is, because if you don't, then people will either judge, or like
Compete.
They're not doing what they're doing. I could do it better. But if you build in again this friendship and this support, and when we read the Bible says, do everything with building each other up, edify one another. And if you can approach this level or this model, if anybody ever tries it, is that it is not a leader, it is a facilitator. It is just a person who says, I kind of like organization. I kind of like making sure things get done. I will do that. And then, so it could vary. And it has been where my wife is a vocal coach. We will plan a vocal workshop, have everybody come, and she's the one who leads it, but she's not the one who set it up. She's not the one. I picked the videos we were going to watch. Somebody else picked some of the other elements, and she's the one who's there as the seniority of what it is to be a vocal coach. When something comes up on the video that creates a dialogue, she can actually answer it. So it's never a hierarchy. It's more of like who's gifted in which area. And I believe that so much too, I'll say that too, is that everyone on the team has secondary gifts that you should really tap into. So it's not just musicians and singers on your team, but what other gifts do they have that can help bring the team to another level? Maybe it's hospitality. That person is like, they love to bake, or they like to do, maybe they bring, muffins to the church on Sunday morning for the team, or whatever other gifts there might be. I've had more powerful worship services when the prayer team has prayed over the team versus the worship team praying for us. Like, hey Jimmy, would you come and would you pray over the team, pray a blessing and anointing? So using the other gifts to help grow that worship ministry and make it more healthy.
Yeah, I think the section leader experience I have, and that is at the bigger church I played, there was a guitar player. He was clearly the lead guy. I mean, he was amazing. I mean, he was just there.
About yourself.
No, it wasn't me. I wish. I idolize him. No, he was established. He was there. He was like their lead guitar player. Might have even been on staff, or some of their musicians were paid, but as they were building out their guitar players, I was one of them. But then he would always tell me like, hey, you're doing these parts, you're doing these. And he would come to practice sometimes, especially early on onboarding a new player. And he would sit out there and he would come up and be like, hey, you need to adjust these pedal settings. And he was very involved, like creating that consistent sound that they were looking for. He was like, you know,
Yep.
just trying to live up to his level, basically all I did. Just trying to live up to this is, I mean, if I want to step into this role, then this is the level they're at. So I had to buy some extra pedals. I had to ask him, hey, fix this, you know, I mean, I know what I'm doing, but still he had that level of like, and that helps to have musicians who are willing to do that. I mean, I could have been like, I'm just going to, and there are people that are like, I'm going to use this sound every week anyway, because it's my sound. And I was like, you know, this is your thing. Just tell me which settings. And he'd be like, yeah, you always need more. He was always telling me more gain and more verb, because you think it's enough in your head, but you don't know what out there. It doesn't sound like enough. Yeah. So I was really liked that era, because I was like learning. I was able to play at the level I could play at, but also be like, oh, I'm getting like extra, like I'm leveling up basically. In little increments in my mind, like, oh, these are good things. So you want, as a musician, this is key to be teachable. Even at, I mean, I had been already full-time worship leader, but I'm willing to go to that and go, okay, I'm gonna learn some more. I'm gonna get better. I'm gonna look to other people, and that's really important for musicians.
You know, creative people are not necessarily the best structured people. So like that guy's probably really great as his tone, his playing, and all that kind of stuff. But that's not necessarily. If he was to be the section leader, he would be held back from accomplishing what he could actually bring, which would be, let me teach you and move you along. And then you had somebody behind him who was making sure that it was all like working out and stuff. Yeah. So you just find the different strengths.
That does make sense, because you're in a church, you only have so many people, and then you have people that are, you know, have great amount of talent, and other people who are struggling. And I'm always trying to level up the team. And my whole thing is always like, I've got this circle in the Propel curriculum. It's the God-inspired circle, and it's like you're having your vision, and then you're going around the circle over and over again, because you're going to level up a little bit every time you go around the circle.
Another thing that can help with that too is making space in your practice or your rehearsals for other people to be in. Like I've got a couple of people right now where I said, hey, why don't you bring your stuff to practice and play along? We're not going to schedule you for Sunday, but why don't you see how you fit in? And you sit, like if you're the guitar player, if it was you and you could sit next to the other guy, and you're still plugged in the ears and he's plugged, and you can kind of like shadow on the stage on a Thursday night where it's safe and you're really not, we just don't put you in the mix or nobody puts you in the ears, but you can kind of experience what this is like, and you're kind of like being pulled, like kind of towed into that experience. And then when you're ready, when I notice you're getting it, your tone's getting there, you're getting cleaner on those chords or whatever it is that you're doing, why don't we try you on a Sunday? And it's a very slow approach, but again, it's Jesus said, you know, make disciples, and that's what we should aspire to, is disciple people into that. And so that's why when I go back to that idea of evaluation, I evaluate where you're at, and then I figure out, you know, for me, when I say the audition is like, no, you're not good enough, go figure it out and come back when you're ready. For evaluation for me, I'm like, no, you're not good enough yet. Let's figure out how to get you there. And if you're willing to do the work, you can't get there, but I'm going to help you on that journey. So, and that's the part I think that the church needs to absorb, is like, and it may be just me because I have more experience and I can play all the instruments, that I have the capacity to be able to do that with each person and say, here's where you're at, here's where you need to be, here's a plan to get you there. Connect with so-and-so, hang out with so-and-so, and then let's have you in some practices. You work out a plan for them to get them to where they want to be.
Yeah, because I'm always relating this to these past experiences, but I've been on stage since I was in the 8th grade, so I'm not afraid to be on stage. Yeah. But this church I was playing with, quite bigger than the other churches I've been leading at. And like I said, the people up there already were like very good. It's intimidating, even to you got to have some level of being intimidated, or you're like,
Sure.
So they did have a shadow program. We had to play, I don't know, weeks or months until we had to play at the rehearsal, had to show up, and then they would be like, all right, you're ready. But I can imagine that if they would have just said, and I don't think I shadowed like two weeks or something. It wasn't long, but it was still safe for me. Like, okay, I'm going to walk out on this stage. It's a lot bigger. You got to get used to these in-ears. You got to get used to the MD. You got to get used to all this stuff.
Yep.
And I take that, and we can shrink that down to a church, let's say of 100 or something, where I'm like, no big deal. This doesn't seem like, I mean, it's pretty simple. The setup's pretty simple. Nobody's expecting too much. Maybe at this moment, I feel fine, but some new musician coming in, they might feel like, oh my gosh, I've never been on a stage. Like, it's important. Shadowing is important. It doesn't matter. You know, my level of tolerance for being intimidated was very high.
Yep.
But I've seen that in my younger musicians, even at any size church. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Once you walk out, like, it's like your first concert that you played in the closet.
In the closet, yeah.
That's every musician. Even if they're like 30 years old, they're feeling like, I see that in people like, here, just plug in and play. And I just try to get people up there, like, and then they're frozen. You know, it's like shadowing team leaders, somebody that they can look up to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is huge, because I don't want to be, I don't want to be that guy that just thinks like, just do it. And then they're back there just like they mess up and they're feeling. So that's part of it. So let's go on to this. What's a core value? And you've talked probably about a lot anyway, that's driven most of your success to this point, as a team builder. And what is that core value, and how do you develop that in yourself? How do you keep developing it?
Yeah, I think, like you said, we've talked about it a lot. It's people. People are the priority. So anything in church, no matter ministry, what you're part of, whether it's tech, worship, hosting, whatever, it's all because people are there. And we are called to love those people. It's the greatest commandment. God said, love God and love people. And then go out and you share that testimony with the rest of the world. And we look again at Acts, they're in their homes worshiping, but then they're down at the temple and the people are saying, what's going on with you guys? Well, we're in love with God and we're in love with one another. Like, well, how can we be a part of that? That's the church. Like, the more we are in love with one another or loving one another, it's just attractive. It's people like, wow, you actually like one another. So a core value for me is that somebody asked me the other day, said, Shawn, has there ever been anybody in your life that you really just didn't like? I said, to be honest, no. Like, I don't think so. I mean, there's people who frustrate me, but that's just something that I have, and I think that is a gift.
That is a spiritual gift, because you've been in ministry this whole time. I'd have a list of like, hold on a minute, let me see. It's this guy, that guy, that girl.
No, and my wife laughs at me sometimes because I'm always pulling for the underdog. I'm always, I don't have favoritism. I love one person as much as the other. I get along with people more easier than others, but everybody always has a space for me, and I think that's why as I'm more in care ministry right now, that helps. I can walk into a hospital room or step onto a stage and I can be there in that environment and feel good about it.
So I want to dig deep into this part right here, because I'm talking, what you're saying is, it is important, but I want to ask you how you deal with this, and I dig down deep and tell us, because this is, I struggle with this, and I know every musicians and worship leaders struggle with this. And what you just said is kind of blowing my mind, because like I've got a list of people I could just write down. I'm like, this person, that person. Yeah. How do you deal with perfectionism and failure? For example, how do you balance your own musical expectations with the limitations you face in ministry programs? And do you know what I mean when I'm asking that?
Yeah. I'll say this. I kind of use this. I borrowed this from, I can't remember where I first heard it, but I borrowed this teaching is you have proactive, reactive, and radioactive. So you try to be proactive as much as you possibly can, because then you can handle things. Reactive is something is going wrong. You got to deal with it. You can't bury it, but you got to deal with it. And then you got radioactive, which is so far gone now that it's dangerous. The goal should be for us to be proactive as much as possible. That's why I believe in preparation. We talked about earlier about, okay, what attracts people? How do you help leaders? It's a team model. I don't plan set lists by myself. I sit around a table. Sometimes it takes an hour. Sometimes it takes 4 hours. But we plan our sets together. I don't do it alone. So I have this really big appreciation, which I didn't have younger, of being ahead. Like the more I can be in front of something, then the more proactive I can save myself from a radioactive issue or whatever it is. So on, if anybody uses Loop Community or multi-tracks or anything, like there are parts on there. We put those up on Planning Center, and the piano player has his part, the guitar has his part. I mean, those things are on there. They can practice them. They can, and with us getting a month ahead, like right now, we're in January. The person who's playing in February has a whole month to figure out their parts and practice and get it. And so they're not as likely to hit a wrong note or to make a mess up, or it doesn't happen very often. That I go back in the past, and some people used to show up and they wouldn't know the hook, or they would know things and I'd have to show them. Because as a worship pastor, you should know all of that stuff too. I think it kind of goes like this. But being ahead of that, you just try to be proactive. Like,
so do they know? Does your team know? I better show up and know my part, or Shawn's gonna go crazy on me.
Honestly, it's more them than me. I mean, I'm a pretty gracious person. It means more to them than it does to me.
The overall team, they're part of the team. They know it matters.
They have bought into the reality. Our congregation is large enough where they will be noticed. And I'll tell you where it changed a lot is online. So online, there's very little forgiveness
and it's recorded.
It's recorded.
I hate it when you hit a wrong note. It's there. It's like it's in infamy now. Like, oh, there it is. Just rewind it.
Yep. And I mean, my team, the team that we have right now they're doing a really well job. And of course, there's always, is it mega church quality and all that kind of stuff? No. But for what our congregation is called to, we are doing a really good job. I'm very proud of our team.
So talk. We're gonna dig in that more, but tell me, like, I'm a worship leader and I got people hitting wrong notes, people not learning their parts. What?
Yeah. So I can't remember.
That's a frustration. What do you think? Just a quick fix that.
I think we can link to this. I'll have to find it, but I can't remember who it was. But there's a really good teaching on this where there's a graph, and you have to kind of know your team and you have to know the moment. So let's say there's somebody on your team and they're completely confident, like they're not bothered. You have a good relationship with them. They're not going to feel. So right there in practice, you say, hey, bro, like, that's not right. Like, do you want to work that out? You could do that. But let's say you have somebody on your team who's not confident and you don't have a really good relationship with them. Well, the worst thing you could do is call them out in front of everybody on the team right there in that moment. So an example is you could say, hey, we've been doing this for half an hour. Why don't we take a break? Everybody go grab some water, go to the bathroom. You pull that person aside. You say, hey, I know you're struggling with that part. Like, what's going on? Did you have a chance to practice that? I didn't have it. I mean, so-and-so, this and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, well, why don't we just leave that off right now? And why don't you practice? I mean, so you deal with it. You need to know how to handle a situation.
I would just tackle him from the microphone.
You would have tackled him from the microphone?
Heckle him. You stink.
Yeah. And see,
get your parts together. No, but I think that's
happened too.
That circles back to your people comment, because anytime I've been in leadership, like when it's my team, and even if I'm in the secondary leadership where I'm at now, where I lead some, but I'm not like a worship leader, or when I was the tech director, those people already know I love them, and I'm pretty easygoing, so I can say whatever I want usually, and they're like, they get it, because I'm their friend.
Right.
If you don't have that, it's really hard to even, like, I don't want to bring up to Bob that he keeps playing the rhythms wrong.
Yep.
And then it becomes a toxic, maybe you're saying that's radioactive. It becomes, now you can't even talk to Bob because he's going to be mad.
I'll tell you where I've dealt more, rather than notes, is tone or technique is where you find that issue.
Guitar players,
drummers playing like a drum machine. You're like, I need you to feel it more, or the guitar player's too dry and you need it wet. And those are more of the, again, that comes around. You have to realize that that practice is the very small part of what you actually are trying to accomplish. It's relationship. It's building that out. It's being ahead of the game. For any worship leader that is listening, like, you have to realize that you are the servant leader. Jesus was the servant to his disciples. He washed their feet. He made sure that they were equipped. So we as leaders need to be concerned with our own success, but even more so, how are we helping our team succeed? And you have to give them the resources, give them the training, give them the encouragement, give them the feedback. Like, you really have to pastor your team and think about you are more than just a band director. You are a life coach to them as well. So
yeah, and I think as I was classically trained and in university, it's different than like church, because it's like, oh, we're just playing. It's okay if it's this and that. And my background is much more like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
And so it can be
a D is a D. Don't play a D half or like D sharp.
Yeah, it's a little strange when you're. Yeah. I'm a little intense on that, but I think being trained in a different way than just. But I think it's okay to set your expectations. I mean, for me, I had to, because that's why I said, how do you deal with your perfectionism and your failures in a team and your expectations? Like, I want it to be this, but it's only this. And I love your answer, because I resonate with all that, like working ahead, planning ahead. And then really, if you're not into the people, it's weird. It gets really dry if you're just trying to crank out music, but you don't like the people you're playing with. Right. My first band was in 8th grade, and all through my early life of being in a band, I was in a band with my best friends.
Nice.
So that's how I feel like church should be. And it sounds like,
oh, for sure,
that's where you're at.
Absolutely.
It's the best 100%. Place. If you're in a band with people you don't like, you got to start moving around, get some new band members, or or start being friends with them.
Yep. Start doing some go bowling, go roller skating, have a picnic, whatever. It's just let people hang out with one another. Yeah.
It's weird, because I think the church, I'll just make general statements about the church or whatever. Yeah. In our ministries, it is sort of like that. Okay, you're the worship leader, here's these people. And I think we can just get in that vibe where I'm just paid to be here and I'm doing this thing with these people, and it could be that way, but it's never been fun for me that way. It's always been, I've always been, and I always thought maybe it was a flaw, but as I'm talking to you and thinking about it, it's probably not. I always wanted I wanted to be in a band with my friends. And Absolutely. If we're in church, and I've had moments where that's happened through my ministry through the last 20 years, where it's like, and that's the best time. So if you're struggling and you're like, man, and you're having these, what do you call them, radioactive moments, you just gotta, I think, go back to
get away from it.
Go back to people. Go back to, does it really matter? At the end of the day, there's a lot of pressure. And one time, in one part of my ministry, I felt like I'm the worship jukebox. You stick in a quarter, you get out a song. That's what it started feeling like in one of my ministry positions, and that was not good for me. And it ended. Yeah. It ended after not too long after that. And I was glad. I was like, "This is good. It's over." But if you're feeling like the worship jukebox, you're feeling like you're basically hired in as a worship leader, and some of it's like your job is to create all this, the tech, the worship, all this stuff is all on you. Yeah. And then if somebody messes up, it's on you. And then this and people, you're dealing with that. So I think at that time of ministry, I was really burned out. Did you know that my channel statistics show that only about half of you watching right now are subscribed to the channel? If you're enjoying these sessions, please take a moment, hit the subscribe button. If you do that, I promise I'll work hard to make this channel bigger and better with every single episode. And just one more thing. There are over 1,000 video tutorials on the new Worship the King platform that cover everything from guitar, drums, bass, vocals, live stream mixing, audio tech, and more. Through the Worship Band Builder and Propel Mentorship Program, we can work together and take your church to the next level in worship and tech. To learn more, go to worshiptheking.com and click apply. Is burnout on your radar with your team? And how do you avoid it? How do you stay healthy? Because I know you're about ready to go on vacation. Right?
About to hit a sabbatical soon. But that's part of the intentionality too. Emily, she does all of our scheduling, and she does a lot of it, and I look over it. We look over it a lot because, yes, you're pastoring. My wife is very passionate about this too, but some people may look at scheduling as though it's just fitting people into the right pieces, but it's more than that. If you can approach it from a pastoral level, you are looking at a lot of different things. So I don't know if you want to get into scheduling, but you are.
Go ahead. Yeah.
And again, it's probably different from a big church where they just have a plethora of people to put in. But if I am approaching this as a discipleship person, I'm looking like, okay, I've got a strong drummer. Let's put that bass player that's a little bit more challenging with that strong drummer, so that drummer can pull that bass player up a little bit. And if you put a drummer that's not so good, a bass player that's not so good, and a guitar player that's not so good, and then a worship leader, all of a sudden it starts falling apart.
And then you schedule me to lead worship that week. I'm going to be. Yeah.
And then you're like, get it right.
Why did you put me with these people? Right.
But I don't know if this is right or wrong. It's just my philosophy, but there needs to be some of that. Otherwise, you're not giving a space for people to develop and grow in. You can't have, at least at our level of church, 10 out of 10s. And I remember when I first started leading worship, my wife was so back on me on this. Like, you can't stop. You can't just keep putting 10 out of 10s out there. You got to allow room for people to develop and grow. And again, that can be in a practice, but we have youth on our Sundays because they're just playing A2 or singing a background vocal behind. And yeah, maybe they're not in the mix as much, but they're getting that experience. They're coming along and they're being trained for the next generation. I won't be there. Like, we won't be there in 10, 20 years. It'll be this next generation. So if we don't help them make that transition and fall in love with the church, then it's bad news in my opinion. But
real bad. Yeah, we've got a lot of youth in our team right now.
Good.
Kids
awesome.
that were. Yeah, it was last week I played electric and Ethan was standing behind me. He's he's 18 or 19 now, but he started playing guitar in our youth band when he was like 14, 13.
Yeah. Nice.
So we actually have a drummer who's like 14.
Yeah.
Just it blew me away. I mean, he started playing in the youth band, and then I was gone for a while. I came back. He was playing in the main service, which I thought he was only 13, I think.
I think if we can give people a chance, quick story. Jonathan, I first heard him play drums when he was 14 years old in the basement of his parents' house. I pulled him into playing at youth and college. He ended up living with me for a little while when he was going through college. Long story short, from 14 to later on, he ended up becoming the worship pastor of that church that we were involved in many years over that time. So you just never know what potential people have, and you got to kind of just, one eye closed, one eye open kind of thing, but take some risks on some people.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I have that sort of, I know some people will just tell me, like, every time we talk, you want me to do this. I'm like, yeah, but if I'm in the director role right now, you better believe I'm going to be like trying to pull you in and trying to get you. Yeah. And our whole tech booth is like kids that are. It's strange because now they're like 12 and they're running Pro Presenter and doing stuff. We've got our youth group doing it now. Yeah. It's kind of interesting.
They're smart, man. They're eager for it too.
And they kind of have to come, so they can't. Their parents make. If they got good parents, they're coming. They're making them. Mm-hmm. So we have a 16-year-old running our live stream now. I mean, it's weird that we've just kind of done that, and that's always been part of my Worship the King and the band builder thing. Is like get them in there young and like just teach them how to do it. Yeah. But I actually like playing with the young musicians because they remind me of myself when I was younger. I'm like, they're excited. They're always buying pedals and telling me stuff like this. Yeah. I'm like, just keep going. Yeah. But I did struggle with that. You can struggle with that if you got the drummer that you love. You want him back there every time. Sometimes you got a drummer that's not as tight. And I've chilled out a lot the last couple of years anyway. So
that's why that pre-planning helps you too. Like we make our schedule. Like, first of all, start with who's the worship leaders, who's going to be there. We also share worship. There's not one worship leader on stage ever. It's usually 2-3 worship leaders at a time, and they're sharing that. But if you make your worship leader schedule, then you make your band schedule, then when you're picking your songs, okay, this is who we have. So-and-so drummer is able to do this song well, but not so much that one. It helps if you think about it as one big thing that all flows together and is aligned together versus separated pieces. They all flow together. That's what I mean. Like your scheduling fits in to your song selection, fits into your worship leading. It all has to kind of flow together.
So does your wife, you said she does the scheduling?
She doesn't do it anymore, but she's just so much passionate about it. She'll sometimes take a look at it, and she's more of the vocalist, and she kind of knows, okay, this person probably would go here, or this is going on. And well, she's very relational, so she knows what's going on in someone's life. Maybe you should give them this one off and kind of back off this month and give them a break, but still invite them. So it'll be like this thing. They're probably going to say no, but you should still invite them, send them an invitation anyways, but just expect that they're going to decline. So that's kind of those, I don't know if you want to say politics of the world. You have to play some of those things so that that person knows, hey, it was nice to be invited. They know I can't do it. I'm going to decline. But all along we know that that's going to go in that direction anyways. But if you never schedule them, then they're going to think, oh, they know what's going on in my life. They don't want me on stage anymore. They don't like me anymore. So it's all those mind games and stuff too. So you have to think of from a pastoral perspective. If you know the people, if you know what's going on in their life, and you know what's going on in your team and where the church is at, it's also great when you can ask your pastors, your communicators, is there any way we can know where you're going, like the sermon series or direction, so you can help support that as well too.
So your pastor, everybody sees this worship thing going on, and it's all going great. Everybody's singing, it's wonderful. Mm-hmm. And it can look like it's really simple, like, oh, they just did worship, but you're like the mastermind of all this stuff behind the scenes. Do you ever drive around and just think like how intricate it really is what you're doing?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know how. I think a lot of what I've done in my life, it's just got to be God.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, even just like doing like a house project around the house, somehow it happens. I'm like, how did I really do that? I just knew how to do it. So
yeah, I kind of highlighted that because I want people listening to this, people who want to be a worship leader, people who are thinking about being a worship leader, or worship leaders who are just struggling and going like, man, it's not working. Listening to you is sort of, it's brought up to the surface, all of the intricacies and things that you're doing. Mm-hmm. Because when you, as a worship leader, I think sometimes we can just think, we want to go up there, we want to lead worship, and we want it to be awesome. We want it all to fall in place. Yeah. But have we really done the hard work? Have we really done planning a month or two in advance? Have we really picked the right songs for the right people? Have we really put the right musicians together?
Yeah.
All stuff that I can see that I've been doing all of my life and orchestrating. Yeah. When I've been successful, I'm like, oh, it's all happening because I'm obsessive, so I'll just obsess over all these details.
Did you color code your people? Have you ever done that?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. I did too. So that's when it got taken away from me.
Oh, did it?
Okay, you're spending 4 hours on 4 weeks. I was like, but Jonathan's orange and John is blue. And
I had 3 bands and they were red, blue, and green. I've done some weird stuff, but you start to notice who plays together well and when I'm up there and I'm playing, I'm like, this isn't jiving. I'm just like, I'm not going to do that again. And so I guess you can obsessively do it. But if you're a worship leader or want to be a worship leader, and I know a lot of people in Propel and through my side are learning. Yeah. None of this comes overnight. And that's why I kind of asked you, it can take, for me, I took a church because your answer was too good. It was too like, oh, it was so easy. It just happened. It flowed in from the back. And that's rare. I will tell you that is rare. The last church I took many years ago, it took me like about 3 or 4 years to build a team. And and then it was like, okay, this is where I started feeling like really comfortable and they started feeling comfortable, but that's relational. It's absolutely from the beginning of walking into a new church. It might be 2 or 3 years before you're going like, I'm really flowing and I have all the colors or I have all the people. and I know the teams, and I've built and I've recruited the holes that are missing. That's why you were hired, because
Good
there
point.
there were things that needed to be done.
Right.
So, I mean, you have had some great like experiences where you're able to just, and I've noticed that too. You're going to have good experiences here, bad experiences here. You're going to have middle experiences here, all along the way. But nothing's going to change. Being a nice person,
Sure.
taking care of the people, planning ahead, doing all the stuff that I talk about in Propel. Propel is very technical. It's not very pastoral. It's very technical.
Great. Yeah.
It's a lot of like how you would technically do this. A lot of the stuff your success is coming because of those technical things. I think I already have the answer to this. I've got a couple more questions.
Okay.
But speak to the future worship leaders. What's critical? And I think you've already said this. So, but I'll still read it because I don't think we can overstate it.
Okay.
What is a critical piece of the puzzle to becoming effective as a worship leader long term?
Long term, it's spiritual disciplines. So there's more to worshiping God, a whole lot more to connecting with God than music. Music will fail you. Sometimes it's not enough, or it's not doing it right. There's something so much more deeper that God's trying to connect with you in. And my favorite book, other than the Bible, is Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. And he talks about these disciplines are, in a sense, they're like a table and chair, like you and I are sitting at this table and chair. Well, the table and the chair would represent prayer, study, fasting, solitude, all these different things in worship. But they have no power other than just to connect the two of us. And all of these different, avenues, if you will, like for us to come to a meeting place with God are in place so that we can have a connection with Him. And, a song can do some, but we've got those songs out there that say, I'll bring you more than a song. Well, what's more than a song? A song is where my soul is actually connecting with God. And songs are used as tools or prayers that we can actually connect with God. But sometimes in a service, you got to pray. And your prayer has to be anointed. Or sometimes you have to bring a scripture. And that scripture has to have the right context that applies to the journey that you're in with your church. Sometimes, people are afraid of silence, but intentional silence. Hey, everyone, let's be still and let's be in the reverence of the Lord right now. Like, I think the longevity for me has been the disciplines. So the disciplines of the faith, like, align me with God much, much more than a song. There's so much more as a worship pastor. And you have to have that quiet time. You have to have accountability. So I also, I'm not alone in my worship leading. I have friends, I have mentors, I have people. If you are talking to people that are struggling out there, pick up the phone and call the church down the road and say, I'm struggling. Can I buy a cup of coffee? I just need to talk this out with you. We have to realize that we're not just the Baptist church or the Assembly of God. We are just the church of that city, and we need to be together and help one another. For a while, I had a thing called an alliance. It was like just getting different worship leaders in my city around a table at Panera and saying, what's going on with you? How are you going? What are you going through? Is there anyone here that can help? Is there anyone that can just speak into that? Or can we pray for each other? And just know, again, it comes back to knowing one another. So the disciplines is good for longevity. I think having other people in your life is longevity, and then seeing yourself as a part of a bigger purpose than just your team. You're a part of the church. You're part of this house. So knowing the mission of your house, the vision of your house, will keep you motivated and keep you excited. So if you're a very missional church and you haven't gone out and done a concert like where homeless people hang out, like maybe that's something you want to think about. Like, how can I take my team and introduce them to the vision of this house? If just tie into a bigger part of where you're at, and you'll find that there's so many opportunities for you to do a lot of different things. So
Yeah, I think what resonates with me right there is that you're not alone.
I'm not alone.
I mean, you can feel alone. Worship leaders, I'm sure, pastors feel alone. Worship leaders probably feel alone too. I guess I do. Everybody feels alone. That's something I learned. Maybe that was during the whole 2020 debacle. Everybody's alone, and I don't think you have to be. You don't have to be. You can call. You can be. It's funny how you can be going through all this stuff, and if you just sit down and talk to somebody outside of your circle and be like, "Here's what's going on," they're like, "Oh, well, this is here. Here's why that's happening."
Sure.
Why are you worried about that? This could be fixed by doing this. You're like, oh yeah, and okay, I have hope.
Yeah.
Because you're not alone. And I think that's all those things you said are great because it isn't. I think a lot of times we might want to just think it is a song. It is about us. It is about singing and playing in the band, and the modern church has done this partly to the movement. You got the fog, you got the lights, you got the haze, you got the this. All this stuff can be good, but it isn't. That isn't the reason we're all here. That can make you feel alone if you're not connected to Christ. If you're not connected to the mission.
Yeah,
I feel like there's a lot of noise, and I think that those things you're saying are huge for worship leaders who are starting.
Sure.
Don't go down that road where it's like all about that, or if you're just already burned out, where you're like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. I'm just the jukebox. Just stick another quarter in, I'll sing you a song.
Yeah. And you may use that, but it can be so much more. I mean, like Brother Lawrence in his book, he was a dishwasher, and he said, practice the presence of God. It's like you can practice God's presence anywhere with anything that you're doing.
Right.
You can turn anything that is going on into an act of worship. And so I think that we can do things well, but you got to find that deeper layer that, There's something else I was going to say right now. It was really good too. Oh, well.
Yeah. Well, I got a question.
Yeah.
This is my last one. If you think of that, tell me what you think if you think of that. What's and you said you were going to write a book. Maybe that's part of it. What's one of your big future goals? This is about you. Something you're dreaming to accomplish in your ministry, music, or family. What do you got? Because I'm a big dreamer. I'm always thinking like the next thing. What do you? Can be your family, your ministry, music, your book. What?
Yeah, I mean, sabbatical is going to help with that. But for 20 years, the scripture 7:14 comes from 2 Chronicles 7:14 has always been this thing in front of me that God's been talking to me about, and the address of my house is 2714. God just paints it everywhere around my life, and so I've been kind of just seeking God about what this is. But just quickly, the context of 2 Chronicles 7:14 is that David has dreamed of a place that will host God's presence to the highest level on the earth. Like, this is his dream. Unfortunately, because of his life and his things, he can't do it. So he passes this dream down to his son Solomon. And Solomon takes this dream and he builds this temple for God that is of the best of best. He brings in the cedar wood from out of country and gold and all these things, and he makes this wonderful resting place for God's presence. And in 2 Chronicles 7, this fire comes down. God consecrates this in response to his hope that Solomon would build this place. And God says, 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven. I will forgive their sin and I will heal their land, and my eyes will be open and my ears will be attentive to the prayers that are offered in this place. And so in this, my heart is to try to help develop worship leaders, musicians, people of God to develop their life like Solomon's heart was to develop the temple. And the temple is now us. We are the temple of God's presence. We host the extraordinary presence of God. And so equipping people, training people, inspiring people to build their lives in such a way that will host God's presence, where that Shekinah glory shows up. God's presence, he comes down and he sends that fire right into the middle of that place, and he's pleased? Are we building our lives in such a way where God's presence is being hosted with the best of the best of the best? And Psalm 66, I love this. It says to make his praise glorious. And we can get confused in this. It's like, okay, glorious, that means like the fog and all that kind of stuff. But glorious, in my opinion, is saying it's the glory of God. And so if I'm going to make his praise glorious, I want to glorify him with my life. And so glorifying God means to glorify him in my marriage, in my parenting, in my physical exercise, in my mental stability, in my emotional state, in my craft. And so just building lives that are on purpose, that are really full of the best of the best that we can put in there. And I have a heart to really come along worship leaders and to encourage. I've reached out to the guys that I know now and say, how can I be a help to you? How can I encourage you? Like, I don't have to do anything, or I can do a lot for you. What do you need? Because I just think that building that temple like Solomon did so many years ago is kind of our same desire today. What can we build to host the presence of God? And if you look at Israel, sees this happening, all the people around, and it says that everybody had to stop doing what they're doing because God's presence was so strong that the priests couldn't even perform their duties anymore. Like, are we putting things in our lives to that level of excellence that God's glory would be to that level? And I believe in the supernatural presence of God. I've encountered him that way. I've felt him. I crave that presence of God so much, and I crave that for other people as well. So if my dream is how the heck does that happen? That's really what I'm trying to figure out right now. How do I play my part in that reality? So
wow,
it's an open question, but that's kind of like the vision of what has been stirring on my heart. And I think it starts with worship leaders, and hopefully I'm talking with some friends. Maybe we have some gatherings where we really just go after that at another level, and we host God's presence and we invite him into those spaces, and then we figure out how to steward that well. So
yeah, that's a great answer.
Okay,
that's a big.
It's ambiguous.
It's spiritually, spiritual. Great. You don't. Well, you're going on a sabbatical soon, so you can.
I'll know more when we get back from.
But you have a vision and a dream to do something. That's I think important.
At the core of that, it really is worship leaders. I'm now 45, and I started leading worship. Like I said, in my late teens. And somebody asked me the question the other day. It's like, what do you know now that you wish you would have known then? And trying to figure out those answers for others. And when I say this to other people and come into their life, it's like, it's not that I know anything better than you, but I can save you some time. How about I just save you some time so that you can get further than I've gotten along? If I can answer questions you have faster or give you resources faster, then maybe you develop and you get stronger and you can help more people, along your way. So that's just my heart's desire, is really to help worship pastors and leaders to really be successful. And I was talking with the guy who's helping me with the sabbatical, and he's saying, people are leaving the ministry faster than ever. 1,500 pastors are coming out and they're just burned out. They're tired, and they're not getting the help that they need. They have too much responsibility, too much weight. And although those are lead pastors that comes along, I would be curious to know what the statistics of worship leaders and musicians, and are they really thriving in this community of the local church? So
yeah. Well, I think a lot of the stuff we talked about today can help.
Cool.
Because when you look at, like I said, when you look at the stage and the services that happen every Sunday, you can just look up there and think it just all happened, but it doesn't just happen. Right. It happens with much planning, prayer, people, discipleship. It has in the past, it has felt like a grind to me, like it's hard to do. But then when I look back at areas of my ministry where I was being successful, I'm like, I'm doing certain things and God's moving in these ways. Yeah. So I hate to see it. I'm on the worship leader forums, and I'm sure you are too. I try not to read them too much. The Facebook worship whatever they are, because
Oh,
it's
the
just
fails or stuff? Or
not even the fails. It's like the regular, you see people
Okay.
like, this has happened, I just got fired, or this happened, how do I deal with this person?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, there's so much going on out there that's like, I can't read. The worship fails, I can watch those. Those are funny, but
Sure.
it's like it's the real community forums. And I'm like,
yeah.
oh, this is just so much that, and that's kind of why I created Propel too. It's like, let's create,
Sure.
there has to be a better way. You're not just making stuff up, and that's why we're failing. So I think we share that similar feeling of like, can you, if I would have known, I had plenty of failures. I also had great mentors. So
same.
That kept me on track. Without them, I would have been, I don't know, I would be nowhere.
Right.
And that's kind of in our phase of my publishing where I'm going. It's
Gotcha.
And that's why we have the new mentorship. It is a mentorship. It is
great.
It is a certification program, but it is a 2-year mentorship. So
that's awesome, man. That's wonderful.
Shawn, thanks for coming.
Sure.
For sharing all this. It was
Time
good.
went by fast. It's crazy.
This has been 2 hours.
Oh my gosh.
We'll
you gotta edit some of this.
no, we'll just keep it going, and we'll. I'm hoping you'll come back and we'll do more. I think we have a lot we could even accomplish together in terms of helping people, because I need people like you, and that have that experience, that pastoral experience, and
sure.
It's good. It's good to see you're succeeding, and I'm praying that you keep succeeding.
Yeah, I think just in closing with that is the two sides. We see David was, when he was called before Saul, he was a skilled player, but it was the anointing. And I think to kind of like put a thing on the end of this is that worship leaders and people I'm talking to need both. You got to be skilled, and you got to touch the technical, physical side, and then the spiritual anointing side. You can't pick one without the other. It's got to be both. So if you're heavily, focusing on all the technical without the spiritual stuff, just kind of balance that out a little bit more. And if you're more spiritual, but your team is not very technical, like raise up that skillful side and try to bring balance to that, because that's when God moves. It's in both of those areas. It's not one or the other. It's absolute both. Skill and that spiritual context.
Did you know that this is a 2-part interview with Shawn Starbuck? So if you missed part 1, check the link in the description and you can learn all about his early life and how he came to be in the ministry position that we just discussed during this episode. Click in the link in the description. Don't miss part 1.